Hello, good morning friends. Welcome back to your favorite channel Code One Digest. Today in this video, I am going to show you how can you write Spring Boot microservice project with MongoDB and with GraphQL. Yes friend, so in this tutorial, I'll show you how to write Spring Boot microservices with GraphQL and MongoDB as a backend. How can you fire query? How can you fire GraphQL query to fetch specific data from your backend system, that is MongoDB, how to insert data into MongoDB using GraphQL Spring Boot. So all of that we will see in this tutorial. It is going to be very informative and very exciting tutorial where we will learn Spring Boot microservices. We'll learn how to connect to MongoDB, how to use Spring Boot JPA, and how can we use GraphQL in Spring Boot, how to fire GraphQL queries to fetch and to save data into the MongoDB. Right, friends? So watch this video till end. It is going to be very exciting and very informative tutorial. Friends, here is the agenda of this tutorial today. I'm going to give you the introduction of the project. We are going to learn Spring Boot microservices with MongoDB GraphQL. Right, friends? Then I'll show you the pom.xml, what all dependencies are required in the pom.xml for Spring Boot microservices, MongoDB, and GraphQL, right? So all of that we'll see. Then I'll explain you what is GraphQL schema, how to write it. Then we'll write the domain objects required for the GraphQL. We'll write the GraphQL controllers to fire the GraphQL queries, right? To fetch data and to insert data. So we'll be writing a GraphQL controller, and then what all configuration required for the GraphQL in our application.properties file. So we will see that as well. Finally, we'll be running and testing our application in GraphiQL tool as well as Postman tool. I'll show you how to fire query in GraphiQL tool as well as from Postman tool as well. As many people have asked me, how can we fire a GraphQL query from Postman? So that I will cover. I'll cover both the testing tool here, that is GraphiQL tool as well as Postman tool. We'll be firing and testing our queries from both these tools. And at the end, I'll be summarizing what we learned in this tutorial. So do watch this tutorial till end. It is going to be very informative and very exciting video today. Right, friends? Okay, friends. So here is the architecture of today's tutorial. What we are trying to do. Let me explain quickly. So in the center, you will see that we are running our GraphQL server, and that is running with our Spring Boot libraries. So GraphQL server is running with our Spring Boot libraries. And on the left hand side, we have a GraphQL client. That means we are using our GraphiQL or Postman testing tool to fire a query. The request will come to our GraphQL server that is running with Spring Boot server. And on the right hand side, it is fetching data from our MongoDB. It may fetch data from other REST APIs, but in this tutorial, we'll be fetching primarily all our data from our MongoDB. So this is how the architecture looks like. Very simple architecture. And this is very common use case of GraphQL to fetch data from the backend and send it to the client. If you have any query on the architecture, or if you have any query on the setup, so post your query in the comment section. I'll try to reply to your query. Right, friends? So if you want to learn Spring Boot microservices with MongoDB, if you want to learn GraphQL, then this is a tutorial for you. Do not miss this tutorial. This is very important and very informative tutorial. You will learn a lot from this tutorial. Okay, friends? So do watch this tutorial till end. Friends, before we proceed in this video, I request you to subscribe this channel to grow Code One Digest family. Friends, I am creating a lot of quality videos on programming, coding concepts, design pattern and design principles, cloud and container technologies, but I'm not getting subscribers. I request you to like, share and subscribe this channel so that I can grow our Code One Digest family. Thank you. I have opened my Visual Studio Code and this is my project. If you see, this is my old project of Spring Boot JPA MongoDB, right? This project I have already done it in past, and I am now converting it to a GraphQL project. So this project, if you see this video, I have done it long ago, and now I'm converting the same code base for the GraphQL. So let me show you what all step. So the very first thing that I'll show you here is our pom.xml. So this is our pom.xml, and the rest of the things remains the same here. You will be adding all the dependencies like a Spring Boot starter web, and for GraphQL we have added this new dependency now. So rest of the pom.xml is the same. Only dependency that I have added now is this Spring Boot starter GraphQL, so that we'll have the GraphQL capabilities, right? So this I have added. I have Lombok, I have Mongo DB, right? So rest of the dependencies are same. Only things what I have added is the GraphQL dependency, right? Now next is, let me show you my very first class that is inside main, and this is our main class. There is no change in this class. This class is as is. Now the very first thing that we do in GraphQL project is we define the schema. So now go to the resource, right? In resources folder you have to add one GraphQL directory, and this directory you have to keep the GraphQL schema file. So you can name it schema.graphqls, right? Extension must be a .graphqls. Otherwise, it will not be able to detect where is the schema file, and schema file is must. A schema file is the file where you define what all queries and what all mutation you will allow for the consumer. So you will be defining all the queries, what all information your consumer can fetch, and you will be defining the mutations, what all information your consumer can update into a database. So let us see that. I'll show you. So I have defined a query, and fetching customer by ID. So customer has to provide ID of a customer, and then I'll return customer object, and customer is nothing but this customer. What all attribute it has? It has ID, it has name, it has role, it has age, and it has customer contact detail. Now this customer contact detail is another object, that is customer contact details, and where it is defined? It is defined here. And customer contact detail, what all attribute it has? It has ID, email, mobile, and address. So these are the contact detail which we are linking with this customer, right? So this is my query, and I am defining a mutation. So here type mutation, and I'm saying add customer, where I am giving all the customer plus contact detail attributes together. So I'm saying add customer, then name as a string, age as integer, role as a string, email ID as a string. Remember, email ID is part of contact detail, but I'm giving it as a part of same mutation. I'll show you the code why it is like that. Email as a string, mobile as a string, and address as a string, right? So all these are done, right? And it will be going to a customer object. If you see, it is going to a customer. Once the schema file is done, then we will go to our controllers. So I have this customer controller where I have our REST API like slash customer name. Here I'm getting a customer by name, and slash customer save. So here I'm saving a customer, but this controller we are not going to use for GraphQL. GraphQL doesn't work with this kind of URL. These are REST API, but GraphQL will not use this controller, right? Same way I have a customer contact detail controller. This is also having a REST API get mapping slash contacts email and slash contact save to save a contact detail, right? So these two controllers are for the REST API, not for the GraphQL. Now new controller that I have written is GraphQL customer controller. This is important. So let me show you. Okay. So here in this GraphQL customer controller, it is also a REST controller. I have auto wired two services, customer service and customer contact service. So both the services, these are the business layer classes. This class is actually contacting the repository layer. Okay. I have auto wired both the classes, business layer classes here in this controller. This is our GraphQL controller, right? Very first query mapping I have written is customer by ID. That means we have to fetch the customer by ID. And why it is customer by ID? This method name will be using in a query. I'll show you that. So remember, our method name is customer by ID. An argument that will provide is ID as a string. And then I'll be calling my customer service to get customer by ID. Okay, so this will give me a customer, right? In that, if I have to get customer plus contact detail together, then we have to use schema mapping. So here in this method, we are fetching the customer contact details, okay, by passing the customer object. So from customer, we will retrieve our contact detail ID. So if you see here, we are calling the get customer contact detail by ID by passing the contact ID from our customer object. That means this object. So when we try to fetch the customer, customer internally fetch the customer contact detail by providing the contact detail ID, right? That is what we have done here. This is our query mapping. We are fetching the customer. Now customer will come with the contact ID, and that contact ID will pass here as a part of customer object. And then from another service, our contact detail service, we will fetch the contact detail, right? And it will return the customer contact detail. Let me show you query, how we'll fire the query. Okay, so this is just for a reference. So this is the sample query so that we can understand. This query will fire at the end once we start our server, but just to show you now so that you can understand the relation between the query and this methods. Okay, so if you see this query, query always start with the keyword query and customer details. So you can give any name to the query. Now in that I'll be calling the method customer by ID. Do you see this name? This is important. Customer by ID we have used here in this customer by ID. So here this method name is matching with this method here, right? So that is why we are saying it's a query mapping. It's a query mapping. When we come with this query, customer by ID, when the query comes to a GraphQL server, it knows which method to invoke. So it will invoke this method. It will read the ID from this query. If you see, we are passing ID as key2. This is my just sample ID. Okay, so this is a value of that ID. I want to fetch ID. I want to fetch name of the customer, role of the customer, age of the customer, and then I am also fetching the contact details. So contact details here having contact ID, email, mobile, and address. So all these attributes, okay, will come as a response to me, the customer details as well as contact details. That is why we have done the schema mapping here. So these annotations are very important in Spring Boot for GraphQL. Query mapping, that means we map the method name with the this particular method, what we defined under the query. Now, if we have any nested object that we want to fetch, let's say customer contact detail. So that customer contact detail come from the schema mapping. So that customer contact detail is try to match from this schema. Okay, so it will fetch it from schema and give it to us. Now let me show you the service layer class. So what happens when I call this customer service dot get customer ID or customer contact detail service dot get customer detail ID? It is fetching the information from my backend repository. Okay, so this is my customer repository. This is nothing but a Mongo DB repository that I am using. Okay, Mongo repository where my domain object is a customer. Okay, I have defined few methods, but we are not using this method. These methods are used for the REST API. We will be using out of the box method that is find by ID because the GraphQL is working with the find by ID. If we come back to service, get customer by ID is a method where I am trying to get the customer. And if you see, I am calling repository.get find by ID. And this method is defined out of the box. Spring repositories give you this method out of the box. We need not to define. Once customer is arrived, then it will go to customer detail service and it will fetch customer contact details by ID again. So if you see customer contact detail repository, find by ID. Let me show you this repository. So this is repository. This is again a Mongo repository and the domain object here is customer contact detail, right? Again, these methods are used in a REST API. We will be using out of the box find by ID method. If you see here in this service method, we are using find by ID method. With me so far? Clear? Right? Very simple. Okay. You can convert your REST API project in Spring Boot to a GraphQL enabled. Let me show you my properties file as well. So this is my properties file. If you see, I'm running my server on 8081. This is my MongoDB detail that I'm running in my local host. And the port of MongoDB is 27017. And this is the name of my database in the MongoDB. And it will have a two collections, customer and customer contact details, right? And this is important. These two attributes are required for our development. This is just to test my GraphQL query. So what I am doing is spring.graphql.graphql.enable true. And this is the endpoint of the GraphQL. That means I'll be opening that GraphQL tool at this endpoint. Localhost 8081/GraphQL. So it will open my GraphQL tool where I can fire a query. I will also show you how can you fire a query in Postman. Okay. So friends, this is about the code. You need not to worry about the code or writing a code from the scratch. So I already have all this code in my repository. You can download the code and play with it. So here is my repository. If you see, this is the repository. Code One Digest is my repository, GitHub repository, and this is the project Spring Boot JPA MongoDB Docker, right? And now this project I have made it GraphQL enabled. So all the code is available here. Even GraphQL sample queries are inside this folder. You can clone it, you can modify as per your requirement and start using it. Now what I'll do is I'll run this application and I'll show you the queries. How can we fetch the information from our MongoDB using GraphQL queries? And then I'll explain you the mutation part where we'll be updating and creating the new records or updating the existing records. Okay, friends. So let us see the query part first. How can we fetch the data from a Spring Boot microservice project with MongoDB using GraphQL? Okay. Let me start this project. I'm running this application. Let us see if everything works fine. Yes. So it has started the application and it is running on port 8081. If you see, the application is running on port 8081. Now what I'll do is I'll open that in a browser and I'll also show you how can you test GraphQL queries in Postman. Very first thing you have to do is you have to open localhost 8081/GraphQL tool. Okay, let me do that. Go to the browser and type http localhost 8081/GraphiQL. Okay, if you remember from our properties file, we have given the endpoint. Okay, so you can give your custom string. Okay, if you give some custom string here, so your GraphQL tool will open on that custom string. But I'm using GraphQL as a keyword, so the same I'm using it here. Let me hit this. Yeah, so it's opening that tool. So this is the query tool that we can use to test our GraphQL queries. This is only for development and testing purpose, friends, right? I will show the query first in this tool, and then I'll also show you how can you fire a query in Postman. Some people use the Postman for testing. Some people use this GraphQL query tool. Okay, so both options are available. You can also see the history, what all queries we have fired. I'll show you that. Whatever query you'll fire, it will be added to a history. So you need not to copy paste the query again and again. First time, I'll take the query from my sample queries. So this is the query, what I was referring, right? Okay. Now, this is a query I'll take and paste it in this query text box. Now I have to change the value of this key because I have to fetch the data, write data. Let me go to the MongoDB. This is my MongoDB where I have a customer. And then I have a lot of customer data, but I'll take the latest one that I have created. So this is the key I'll take. And the name of the customer is Pradhan, role is admin, age is 22, and my contact ID is this. Okay, so it will automatically fetch the contact ID with this. Now let me take this customer ID and paste it in that query. Okay, let me paste that in the query, right? And then you have to fire it. You got a data here, customer by ID. You got customer name Pradhan, role admin, age 22, and the customer contact detail also came along with it because this ID, contact ID was there in the customer itself, this contact ID. With this contact ID, it is fetching through schema mapping, it is fetching the contact details. So it is having email as pradhan@gmail.com, mobile these, and address is these, right? So it is working fine. Now, let me also show you the same query how to fire in our Postman. Many people have asked me how to fire the query in a Postman. We can do that as well. Okay, let me open that. So this is my Postman, and in that Postman I have created one collection, GraphQL Springboot Mongo DB project. Okay, in that I have these two queries, but first we'll see the query to get customer with contact detail. So what you have to do is you have to select the method post, and here you have to give a URL of GraphQL. Here we will write http localhost 8080, and you have to use this keyword GraphQL, not a GraphiQL. We are not opening GraphiQL in this Postman. We have to use GraphQL. Okay. Select the post method and type http localhost 8081. If you have any context root, let's say slash my context root slash GraphQL. I don't have any context root, so I have just given slash and GraphQL. And then come to a body. Okay, inside a body you have to select GraphQL as an option. Okay, as soon as you select the GraphQL, then you will be able to see the query and variable, these two fields enabled for you. Okay, in this query field you can paste the same query what we have used. Okay, let me copy this query and paste it here. Yeah, so this is a query I have pasted, and any variable, if we are using any variable, so that we can give here, but I don't have any variable. Now what you can do is just do a send, right? So we got a response here on a same way. It's a 200 response, right friends? And we have this customer ID with Pradhan as a name, role as admin, and age as 22. And then contact details is also arrived with email ID this pradhan@gmail.com, mobile number, and address is Pune, right? So this is how you can test your GraphQL query in Postman. Always remember, method is post. You have to give localhost 8080 or 8081, whatever port it is, slash your context root, and after that GraphQL. Here we don't use GraphiQL. GraphiQL is in the browser. Okay, here you have to give GraphQL as a keyword. Once you do that, come to a body. In body, you have to select the GraphQL as an option. With me? Clear? Then you will see this query field, variable field, put your query here and start testing it. As simple as that. Okay, friends, as we have seen how to fire a query to get the information, I'm able to fetch the customer information and customer contact detail information as well. So now what I'll do is I'll show you how can we fire a mutation. Mutation is an operation where we try to insert data, try to save data into the database, or try to update the data into a database, right? So for that we use the mutation. So let us go and see the mutation again. Let me show you my schema again, because you have to define the mutation as well in that. So we have defined a type query. Now same way I have defined the type mutation. And here I'm saying add customer. So now this add customer, I'm giving name string, age integer, role string, email string, mobile string, and address string. I'm giving all the attributes for customer and customer detail as well. Now let us see how do we map it into our controller. So let me open my GraphQL controller. So if you see here, I have this mutation mapping. So earlier we had used the query mapping. Now we have to use the mutation mapping. So whenever we are doing a save operation, insert operation, update operation, that time we use the mutation mapping. Okay. And this is the method name add customer, right? So we'll use this method name in our query as well, right? As in our schema also we have defined the add customer, same name, and in our controller, GraphQL controller also we have to use the same name, add customer. Now you have to take all the inputs in form of argument, the way we do in our REST API as at the rate path parameter, at the rate path attribute, or query parameter. Here in GraphQL we say at argument. Okay, at argument string name, at argument string role, at argument integer age, at argument string email. Remember, the name of these attributes must be same what you have defined in your schema, and it should also match with your domain object. I'll show you the domain object as well. So argument integer age, argument in a string email. So this email, mobile, and address, these three are part of my contact details. So what I'm doing is, once this information coming, first I'm creating a contact detail. So I'm initializing my contact object, and then I'm setting a primary key with a UUID, then setting the email ID, mobile number, and address, and calling customer contact detail service dot add customer method. It will go and save this object. Okay, now this object got saved. I have this UUID as well. Now I have primary key of my contact detail, so I can create a customer object. Now I am initializing a customer object, setting its primary key with a new UUID, setting the customer name, its role and age of the customer, and finally in the contact ID I am setting the ID of what we have created above, right? Contact ID from this object will take it and add it to a set it into a customer object. Once this object is ready, then I'm calling customer service dot add customer, and that is how it is saving the customer. So once the customer contact detail is created, we take the ID from it and use it in the customer. Okay, very simple. Earlier we were doing query mapping, schema mapping. Now for mutation, we'll do mutation mapping. We'll go to this service classes and see what these methods are doing. So in this add customer detail method, the customer detail object is coming and we are just calling repository.insert, right? This is out of the box method again. Same way I'm calling the customer service.add customer. Now in this method, I am calling the customer repository.insert customer. Same way. This is again out of the box method. Very simple, right? We are using the Springboot JPA here. Right, friends, clear? Now let me quickly show you my domain object. Very simple domain objects. Customer having these four attributes. Okay, it just have a ID as a primary key and name, role, age, and a string contact ID. If we see the customer contact details, so here ID is again a primary key and it has email, mobile, and address. Right, friends? Okay, I'm using Lombok getter setter for getter setter method. Right? So very simple. Now what I'll do is I'll show you how to test the mutation query, how to send the data to save it into a backend repository. Let me do that. I will show you the mutation query saving of data first from our GraphQL tool in browser, and then I'll again show you the same thing from my Postman tool as well. Right, friends? So let me go to the browser first. So if you see, this is my GraphQL. I've already opened it and fired the get query. Now what I'll do is I'll fire the mutation query. If you see in history, this gets saved because this is the name of the query, so it gets saved. Now let me copy the sample query from my query file I have created. So this is my mutation sample query. I'll paste it here and we'll change the value accordingly. Okay. So what I'm doing is mutation add customer. This is the query, and this add customer is the name of the mutation query, And this add customer method, this is important, this gets mapped, this add customer in a query gets mapped with your controller method. So if you see here, this add customer controller method we have, where we have mutation mapping. So this add customer should match with the query what you have, right? What we are doing here in this add customer method, we are setting name Vimal, okay, role admin, age 32, email vimal@gmail.com. Let me change to new value. Let's say I want to save it as a Pavan, okay. Role, I'll say user. These are just dummy attributes, okay. You can give any value. Age, let it be, and I'll say here pavanmodi@gmail.com, pavanmodi2@gmail.com, and mobile number, any mobile number we can give, an address, let's say Indiranagar, Bangalore, right? So these are the value that I am sending it, and we are defining the attributes of the customer object. Though we are passing the value for customer detail as well, it will create it, because the way we have write code is, first we are creating the customer detail through email, mobile and address field, and then we will create the customer object. So let me fire this first. Do you see, this is the ID of my new customer, Pavan, role user, and 32. We will fetch this now and see. So let me do that. Let me take this ID and we'll try to fetch it, so that we'll fetch the contact detail as well. I'll go to my customer detail. This is the get query, get customer query, and I'll replace the ID here. And now let me fetch it. It will fetch with the customer detail as well. Do you see? It has fetched the customer Pavan, role user, age 32, and the customer contact detail here is this. This is the ID of my contact. This is the email ID, pavanmodi2@gmail.com, and mobile number is this, and this is address. When you fire the mutation query, it has created both the object, it has saved it, right? Because we have written the code like that, though I'm returning only customer object. Now what I'll do is I'll fire the same query from the Postman. We'll add the different user. Let me go to the Postman. Now in the Postman, I have another query, add customer. Same way, we have to select the post method URL localhost 8081 slash GraphQL, not GraphiQL. Here we have to use GraphQL. Come to body section, select the GraphQL as option. You will have a query field and variable field. Paste your mutation query here. Now I'll change the values again. I'll say Hemang is the name, user, or let's say this time admin. I'll say 22 and hemang2@gmail.com. Mobile number, some mobile number, and we'll say Pune, right? So this time I'm firing a query from Postman, and we'll see that this user is created. And once we get the ID of this user, I will fire the get query to get the customer detail as well as the contact detail, right? So this is the response what I have got. This is a customer created, and here is the ID, Hemang admin 22, right? Now what I'll do is I'll take this and go to my get customer query and put that into my query and try to get the data. Okay, now let me fire it. And we got the data. We got Hemang admin 22, and here is the contact detail, hemang2@gmail.com, and these are the contact detail, right friends? So query mapping and our mutation mapping both are working fine. We are able to fetch the customer. We are able to fetch data for both the objects, customer as well as customer contact detail, and we are able to save the data as well through GraphQL query. Using the sample code, you can write the code as per your project requirements, right friend? This is a very basic and very simple pseudo code to get and to insert the data using GraphQL queries. The main advantage of GraphQL is the schema that we define. In this schema, whatever attributes we define, only that attributes can be fetched by the customer. Let's say this contact detail might have more attributes like city, country, street name, etc. But we are interested only in email, mobile, and address. So only these three attributes will come as a part of my response. Other attributes will not come, and that will save my time and bandwidth. So the whole idea behind GraphQL schema is to fetch what you need for your application, for your consumer. We are not underfetching or we are not overfetching the data from the backend. That is a major drawback that we see in our REST APIs. Whenever I fetch the customer, I get all the attributes. Whenever I fetch the contact detail, I'll get all the attributes, though I'm only interested in email ID. So as per the consumer requirement, we can define the schema, we can give a name to a query, okay, and then we can fetch what we want. Only that specific data will come to us. That is where the GraphQL is getting more and more popular. Okay, friends, I hope this is clear. I have created a lot of videos on the GraphQL basics. Go and watch the GraphQL basic videos to understand the basic concept of the GraphQL. The link is there on your screen. Go and watch this playlist. It has all the videos for GraphQL theory, right? So go and watch that as well to understand what is query, what is schema, what is mutation, and all of that have been covered in the playlist. You can go and watch the complete playlist. It is going to be very, very informative and very, very exciting playlist for you. Okay, friends, so if you like this video, so give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, so do subscribe to my channel to grow Code One Digest family. I'll be keep producing the interesting video like this with hands-on, and you will be able to learn the basics of all new concepts and technologies. Right, friends? With me? Thank you. Friends, so here is a summary of the tutorial what we learned today. I gave you introduction of Spring Boot Mongo DB project with GraphQL, how to set up, what all dependencies are required in our pom.xml for Spring Boot, MongoDB and GraphQL. Then I'll show you the domain objects that we have used in GraphQL and our Spring Boot project, how to write GraphQL controllers, how to do a mapping between our controller methods with the schema and the query. And then I have also shown you what all configuration changes required in the properties file to run the GraphQL and GraphiQL tool. Finally, I have shown you by running the application and testing the GraphQL queries, right, to fetch the data and to save the data. And we have fired the queries in both the tools, that is GraphiQL tool as well as Postman tool. If you want to learn the Spring Boot microservices, if you want to learn MongoDB, if you want to learn GraphQL, then this is a tutorial for you. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, so do subscribe to my channel to grow Code One Digest family. Thank you. Friends, if you like this video, so give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for the more interesting videos. Click on the bell icon for the latest video notifications and do not forget to share this video with all your friends and colleagues. This is very useful information for students, beginners and software engineers. I am putting a lot of efforts in creating these contents. So please help me growing the Code One Digest family. Please subscribe to Code One Digest channel for the latest programming and technology related videos. Thank you.